Alec Baldwin is being charged with involuntary manslaughter. He's being charged with the shooting death of cinematographer Helena Hutchins, who was on the set of Rust when he fired a gun at her and she was killed. The armorer in this case, who loaded that gun with a live round and not a blank or a dummy round, has already been tried, convicted, and sentenced to the maximum 18 months. At the morning break of day one of the Alec Baldwin case, we are done with opening statements. The prosecution really focused on telling the story that this gun did not accidentally misfire, stating that they're going to be bringing in the gun manufacturer and really tracking the gun from the gun being manufactured all the way through the gun ending up on the set of Rust, and showing that that gun was safe, showing that that gun did not misfire, that that gun was not malfunctioning, and that that gun did not just bang go off the way Baldwin said to George Stephanopoulos. And that the only reason that destructive testing was done by the FBI is because Baldwin went on TV and said, I pulled out the gun and the gun went off. And they wanted to disprove that this gun accidentally fired. In fact, what we're not going to hear for the jury, but what we know from following this case is that while they were pending that testing, the prosecution dismissed this case. Because if the gun accidentally went off without the trigger being pulled, they weren't going to bring this case because they can't show that Baldwin did anything that he should have known was unsafe. This is an involuntary manslaughter. They have to show either Alec Baldwin acted without due caution and circumscription, which is really with a criminal level of negligence. So did he act without due caution or circumscription, or did he handle the gun recklessly and negligently? Those are the two theories here that the judge read to the jury at the very beginning. So which one is it, or is it a combination of both? The jury doesn't have to be unanimous on the theory. And so that's really what the core for me of this case comes down to. Did he handle the gun recklessly? Should he have known it was dangerous? And the prosecution, I think, should lean into the reason there's all these safety protocols on set is because if something goes wrong, a gun used as a prop can be dangerous. It's why there's safety regulations on set. It's why there's multiple people checking the weapon, because if that's not done, it can be dangerous. But after multiple people check the weapon and give it to him and tell him it's fine, does he have reason to believe at that point that the gun is not safe? And I think this case is going to come down to, at the point when Baldwin is handed the gun, does he have reason to believe at that point it is unsafe? And I think what we'll hear from the experts is if there's a blank in the gun and you're too close to someone, a blank can be dangerous. So even when the gun is safe, you still don't point it at someone, because blanks can do damage to humans, to hearing. They can scare animals on set. There's still safety protocols to follow, even if it's a blank in the gun. And you always follow those safety protocols because it always can cause a problem on set. There's hearing protection. There are things put in place to make sure that actors and crew are safe on set, even when you're using blanks. And it doesn't matter that you're told that it's a cold gun. You still have to treat it responsibly and safely, but you shouldn't expect that there's blanks in it, but you always need to act in a safe manner. And that's going to be the heart of this case. At the lunch break of the very first day of the state of New Mexico versus Alec Baldwin, the judge's rule about objections has gone flying out of the window. The attorneys yeeted it with a force that I have never seen, because all of a sudden, Carrie is just like, whatever, Your Honor, objection, counsel's testifying. We've already lost the plot on this. There were rules, people, society has rules, but the rules in this courtroom are not strongly being enforced by the court at this moment, though she did say, we're going to send the jury to lunch and I'm going to see the attorneys at sidebar. I imagine what she's saying at sidebar is, this is exactly what I told you I didn't want to happen, because then they have these back and forth colloquies in front of the jury, which is exactly what the defense made motions about and is exactly what the is happening. Witness 1, cross-examination question 2. And we've already got Carrie giving full speaking objections. It's absolutely wild. This witness was the first witness in the case against Hannah Gutierrez as well. I don't remember him coming across as so unsure and kind of soft-spoken, but we got into a lot more of his body cam footage of what happened after the shooting in the church. It gave a sense for how small the church is, how chaotic the scene is, the fact that Baldwin and Dave Halls and others are talking. And while Carrie Morrissey seems to be trying to indicate, or at least that's how it felt to me, that Baldwin wasn't following police instructions, that officer's standing like right the there and not telling them to stop talking about the case or the incident. So I don't personally put that on Baldwin. And if I were the jury, I don't really look at that as like, oh, Baldwin's not following instructions. I really look at that as everyone's in shock and that officer is not enforcing what he asked them to do. It's a chaotic scene. It is incredibly loud with the truck that sounds like a light truck right there. And it seems like everybody is just sitting there going, what is happening? And trying to figure out what happened, which is exactly why you want to separate witnesses, because they're trying to figure out what happened, which means when you interview them, you don't know if you're going to get what they remember or what they remember being told. And after an event that is kind of chaotic and traumatic, it's really hard for somebody's brain to parse out, I was told this or I saw this. But again, I don't put that on Baldwin. The officer isn't doing it. So I think trying to make it look like Baldwin's doing something wrong maybe comes off as a bit of a reach and a bit disingenuous to me. It doesn't seem like they're trying to do anything nefarious. It seems to me, honestly, like they're all sitting around going, what just happened? And anyone who's been in a situation that's kind of chaotic, I think that that's the natural human instinct of what just happened? What did you see? How did this happen? How are we here? And I don't think that's really on them. I think that that's on law enforcement, but law enforcement also seems like they're like, what just happened and what is happening here and isn't enforcing it. It's why they should be physically separated out. So they can't do that. And there just weren't enough officers to do that. So I don't, again, think that that's on Baldwin in the way that the questions sort of imply. So we'll see what happens when we get to the rest of cross-examination after lunch. As we got into the afternoon today, the attorneys actually seemed to work fairly well with one another. Part of that seems to be because Erlinda Johnson, A, is delightful, but B, the objections ran a bit more smoothly with objection and then the grounds, and then either the attorney would rephrase or the judge would rule. But it seems that at the end of day one, they have moved through more than 4 witnesses. We've gotten to kind of the place at the end of the first day that we were at the end of day one in the Hannah Gutierrez trial, ending with Marissa Popple, who was the crime scene technician. And she was going through all the foundational evidence, the rounds of ammunition that were recovered on set, both dummy rounds, the blank rounds that can go bang and pop, as the defense said in opening, and then the suspected live rounds that were sent out and tested to the FBI that were determined to be live rounds. In the photos, it's pretty staggering to see the differences because you can see that bright silver primer. It looks starkly different than all of the other rounds. And you saw those on the cart. You saw those in Alec Baldwin's shoulder bandolier that had bullets in it. And you saw those in the gun belt that we learned in Gutierrez's trial was for actor Jensen Ackles. So we saw where all those different rounds are from with this witness. This lays a lot of foundation also for the fact that the gun was recovered in an operable manner. The gun was operating smoothly before it was sent out to the FBI. Remember, if this gun went off accidentally, if it was malfunctioning, then Baldwin didn't take the action necessary to be here. So the prosecution is heading off those arguments of the gun just went off, especially if they intend to play any of the interview with Alec Baldwin and George Stephanopoulos. In that interview, Baldwin is like, I pulled the weapon and the gun went off. Like I pulled it and bang, the gun went off. So if they are going to play any of that to show that his statements changed, they may not, they may, then the prosecution's going to want to head that off and show that the gun wouldn't have just gone bang, essentially, without Baldwin both cocking it and pulling the trigger. And even in opening statement, the defense used video of Baldwin trying to put the jury in the shoes of the actor. And even in all those videos, you saw Baldwin with his finger inside the trigger guard. So the argument that the gun malfunctioned is going to come up, the argument that Baldwin had no intent, but the intent that matters really is, did he pull the trigger? Because this is a non-intentional crime. If it was an intentional crime, it would be a different degree of homicide. It wouldn't be an involuntary manslaughter. Involuntary manslaughter by nature is an accident that you should have known you were doing something dangerous and you didn't act with due caution or circumscription, or you broke the law in a way where you should have known that it was dangerous. You see those involves in reckless driving cases where people are going so substantially above the speed limit and weaving in and out of traffic. If they get in a collision, they didn't mean to kill somebody, but it's more than a car accident because they knew the action was dangerous. You also see some of this depending on the jurisdiction in the DUI laws where you know drinking and driving is dangerous, so you can be charged with those DUI related homicides. This law all kind of comes from the same area. So without getting into that too much, we had a great question from the chat that I'm going to answer in our summary. Why why isn't there a charge for Joel Souza, who was also shot? Why is there only a charge for Helena Hutchins? And that's because of the intention. Alec Baldwin didn't intend to fire a gun at anyone that had a bullet in it. He didn't think there was a live round here. So when you're looking at the assault language and the assault charges, because that would be an assault with a deadly weapon, or you could look at the attempted murder statutes, but he's not attempting to kill anyone here. He's not intending to assault anyone here. He doesn't think that the gun is loaded. No one's arguing that he does. Should he have known that a gun can be dangerous? That's what the jury's going to have to decide. But as to Joel Souza, he survived. So when you're looking at the laws under how do you treat this if somebody survives, there really aren't laws that are going to encompass that behavior for Joel Souza the same way. So that intentionality not being there is different. Could New Mexico have some misdemeanors that might fit? Maybe, but they chose not to charge it. I don't know if Joel Souza wanted anybody to charge it, but that misdemeanor negligent handling of a firearm can also be the basis for this involuntary manslaughter. And is that really what this case is? A negligent handling of a firearm? That's what Dave Hall's pled to. That misdemeanor. If they find that Alec Baldwin negligently handled a firearm and it caused Helena Hutchins' death, they can then charge him with the invol, because that's one of the two theories, the violating that law versus the without due caution or circumscription. So how they made that charging decision, it'd be interesting to see if the prosecution ever talks about it. I don't know if Joel Souza ever wanted it, but there's plenty of civil lawsuits in this case. And I don't know if Joel Souza ever thought that he wanted to be testifying in this case as a victim. For deep dives into the stories that I covered here, you can find them on my YouTube channel at The Emily D. Baker and The Emily Show podcast. I stream every Tuesday and Thursday. The podcast goes live on Wednesdays. And if you want to stay in the loop with everything I'm doing, receive the fastest notifications out there, and get more Law Nerd community, join me at lawnerdapp.com, our free app for iOS and Android.